about 10 years ago, I got to spend about 2 weeks as a pirate. Now, it wasn't cool. It wasn't that I got to wear the hat and maybe look like Johnny Depp. It wasn't that I went treasure hunting. I got to act like a scoundrel. What happened was, one Sunday after church, I was holding my son, and he decided, when he was real little, he wanted to poke me in the eye and scratch me up real good. And after a few hours of waiting to see if it would just get better, I got taken to the doctor's office. And when I left with an eye patch. And I became a pirate. At least that's what my daughter and others wanted to tell me that I looked like. And I learned a couple of things. Like having one eye covered like this made seeing and doing normal things much harder than it needed to be. Like I'd walk around with kind of a hand out in front of me so I wouldn't run into corners or walls as I was going through our house. I would often get blindsided by our dog at the time as she would sneak up on the side that I couldn't see out of to come in and greet me or say hi to me. It was also hard because I didn't like how it looked. Like it was beige and it was thick foam and it had this hard medical looking case on it, and it would stick way off of my eye, and I felt like I looked ridiculous. And so that limited what I would do too, because I didn't want people seeing me in this eye patch. So it wasn't cool, it wasn't fun, it wasn't anything that I was hoping it would be if I ever got called a pirate, but I learned something. Like I've still got that eye patch somewhere in our medicine cabinet. But the most lasting thing I remember is that it is important for me to be able to see and be seen clearly to get through life. It's a lesson that a woman in the book of Genesis chapter 16 also experienced. It's a strange story. Oftentimes we skip over it because there's some things that are problematic to how we look at the world today. But it's an important one for us to look at. Okay. So, Abram and Sarai at this time have been chosen by God to be His people. They are the ones that are going to be used by God to bless all of the world. And they have been spending time with God just before this chapter in a covenant. God came and met with Abram and made a covenant with him that all the nations of the world would be blessed through him and that they would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky or the sand on the shore. And they believed him. And they thought this was an incredible promise, and they were so looking forward to the future. But the problem was that they were 80 years old, and they still didn't have any children. And so how were they supposed to have this many descendants when they couldn't even get one kid into their 80s? And so Sarai was really feeling the pressure. She was feeling the shame of a society that said her job was to make the line go forward, and she wasn't able to do it. She felt like she was out of time. And so she and Abram did what a lot of us do. When things aren't going on our timing, we take God's promises and God's plan, and we try and take them into our own hands. We try and take control of them. And there's one thing that happens every single time we do that. The pain that comes from that ripples out, and more people than just us begin to feel it. And so that's where we pick up in Genesis chapter 16. It says, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. Now here's an important thing to know about her. To be a woman meant that she was down a rung. To be an Egyptian meant that she was a foreigner in a foreign country, which put her down a rung. And to be a maidservant meant that she was a slave, which put her down another rung. She was about as low as you could get in this society. She was the invisible woman. She was to be used and not seen and not noticed. She was just supposed to be there for what they needed her for and nothing else. Let's pick up. So Sarai said to Abram, The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. And Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Now this is really strange to us, and we would not condone this at all today. But at that time, that was a pretty common practice. Remember, the most important thing was continuing on the family line. And if you couldn't do it yourself, you would use whatever means was available to you to be able to do it. And so they took Hagar and they used her for this purpose. The issue was Sarai's plan actually worked. Hagar conceived a child. But Sarai wasn't ready for what was coming next. She hadn't thought through all of the consequences of these actions. When she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think is best." And then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Sarai's insecurity at not being able to have a child runs headfirst into Hagar's pride at becoming pregnant with her master's child. And these two things crashed into each other and blew up the whole family dynamic. Nothing was going to be the same. Hagar is hurt and her mistress is lowered in her respect level. Sarai is hurt and jealous and insecure and doesn't know what to do with it. And so she goes to her husband Abram and tries to put all of the blame on him. Like, you have got to do something about this. Happy wife, happy life. I'm not happy, so you're not going to be happy. Do something about this. And so he gives her permission to oppress Hagar, to do whatever she wants to do to her. She has no rights. She is just there to be used. So he'll do anything to appease his wife and get this off of his radar, because she is not a person to this couple. She has no dignity. She has no rights. She has no name. If you hadn't noticed while we were reading, Sarai and Abram never call Hagar by her name. She's a thing. She's a tool. She's not a person to them. Have you ever been there? Kind of unseen, invisible to people, not a person, but just a thing to be used. So maybe you even feel that way if you're a part of our church, because you wonder, like, do people here actually know my name? Do they know what I care about, where I'm from? Do they know the real me, or do they only know the me I let them see? Kind of this mask I put up so that people can see that part of me, but not this other part of me. Or maybe you're the wife or the mother at home, and you know all of the work that you do for your kids and for your husband to keep the house running, to keep the family being smooth, and you never get noticed for it. You never get thanked for it, and you feel invisible. Maybe you're the friend that always has to be strong, and so you help everybody else with their struggles, but nobody has ever asked you about yours. Maybe you're even not sure if you want them to ask. You know, it's one thing to want to be seen. It's another thing to want to really be known, because to be known means that they've got to get past the things I like them to see. It's kind of like our houses a lot of times. When we have visitors come over, we clean the house. But for a lot of us, there's one room that we just don't clean. What happens is that room helps every other room get clean. And so all of the extra stuff gets shoved in there, and that door gets closed, and people come over, and we're happy to show them the kitchen we cleaned and the living room and the bathrooms, but don't go into the spare bedroom. That one is a mess. That is not going to get looked at. And for a lot of us, our lives are the same way. We've got all of these parts of our lives that we're happy to let people see, but there's this part over here that is a total disaster. It is a mess. I've never gotten around to dealing with this, and I don't want you to see that. And so if you see me, really, then I got to open that door, and I'm not prepared to do that. So I don't even want to be seen. I like the fact that I'm not seen. Or maybe you're just the person who only gets called when something is needed from you. So you're not seen as a person, you're seen as a debit card. You're seen as a safety net. You're seen as I've got no one better. And here's the thing about any of us who have ever been at a place where we have felt unseen. We have no hope. when we aren't seen clearly. We have no hope when we're not seen clearly. And so Hagar runs off into the wilderness, aimlessly wandering, getting far from where she was. She ends up on the backside of the wilderness. In fact, some of the names that we're going to read about in a second about where she located herself, we don't even know where those are anymore. They're so far out in the middle of nowhere that they haven't survived any record of them to this time. And she goes out into the wilderness, and here's the thing. Whenever you end up in the wilderness, something is going to happen. So she ran and fled from her mistress. And then the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. She goes out into the wilderness, lost, not knowing where she's going, just running, because all she can see is what she's presently suffering through. And when she gets there, she is encountered with the very presence of God. In fact, the way it's worded, he intentionally found her. This invisible woman who has a name that's not used, that is at the lowest in the society, that is the very person that God intentionally goes to find in the middle of nowhere. And when he finds her, the first thing he does is call her by name. To give her dignity again, to make her a person again, to let her know that she is known by him. And then he asks her about her life. Like, where are you coming from and where are you going? In other words, you can kind of reword it. What's your story? And what do you have hope in? What are you hoping for? It's not that God didn't know these things already, but he needed her to voice them for her sake. Like when someone asks about you and really tries to get to know you, it helps you to feel seen. And this woman needed that more than anything, to know that she was seen and valued by someone. And it also helps when you start to share your story, when you start to answer these questions, it helps to bring clarity to who you are and to where you are. It's one of the ways that God clears off the patches and the ugliness and the stuff we have over our eyes that keeps us from seeing. And so as she answers the question, it's interesting, she only answers the first one. She knows all too well what she is running from. That pain, that hurt, that angst, that she knows all too well. In fact, that's all she can see. That's what drove her to where she is now. But she has no idea about what's coming next. She has no expectation of the future. She has no hope. Because hope is really about that. Hope is saying that where I am now is not where I'm always going to be. The best is yet to come. But she didn't have that. How would you answer those questions? Where are you come from? What's your story? And where are you going? What do you have hope for? What are you hoping in? To be honest, there are days when I don't see anything but what I've come through or what I'm in the middle of. And I don't have an answer for the future or hope. Recently, I started to get back into getting out into the wilderness to deal with those kinds of days. Like I'm intentionally, literally putting myself out where nobody else is around. I will go by myself. I won't tell other people I'm going. I will go when it's a day that's gross, like cloudy and overcast and foggy and drizzly, because I want as few chances as possible of running across somebody else on the trail. I will take the one that looks like nobody else is going to be on, because I want to get out away from all of this. I need to unplug from the gunk that is covering my eyes to hope that God can come and meet me there to help me see more clearly. And so what I do, I get out in the middle of nowhere like this and I cry out. I cry out with whatever is hurting me, the pressures of being a pastor at a time like this and dealing with people's struggles, seeing people that I care about making mistakes that are hurting their lives and I don't know what to do about it, political pettiness stuff, pandemic things, life, death, things going on in my family, all kinds of stuff. I just pour all of this out as if to say, you want to know where I'm coming from? This is where I'm coming from. And I do that because I've learned something. A change of place plus a change of pace equals a change of perspective. When I go out of where I normally am and I get into a rhythm that I'm not normally in, I will see things more clearly. And the reason I believe that for myself is because when I go out there in those places, God comes to find me. And it is crazy that He meets me there. And He listens to what I have to say, and He reminds me that I am seen, and He clears my vision for what's next because He reminds me about who I am. He reminds me that I'm valuable to Him. And if I am valuable to Him and I can be reminded about who I am, then I'm ready to step in to what's coming next. I can see it clearly again. And that's what happens to Hagar. The angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." And the angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all of his brothers." And so God had come and asked her two questions. She answered the first one, and then here in this part, God is answering the second one for her. She didn't have a picture of the future, and so He names the picture of the future for her. It's the name of her son, Ishmael, which literally means God hears. This one who had no voice was heard by God in the wilderness. And then she's given a description of his life. That, hey, what you've experienced so far isn't going to be everything for you or for him. There's something else coming. And it's kind of a crazy description. Like, I don't know if I want to be described this way at all, but it was beautiful to Hagar's ears because it is the opposite of the life that she has known. Her son would not be a slave. Her son would not be an it. Her son would not be someone that would be taken advantage of and used and silenced. No, he would be strong. He would be unbridled. He would be untamed. And this son of hers would be the first of many, many descendants. And so she had to go back because what she'd gone through wasn't always what it was going to be. And if she went back, then Ishmael could be connected to Abram and his promises and to this promise that had just been given to her, and she would have something better coming than she ever imagined she could have. Being seen gave her hope. Being seen gave her a future beyond the present suffering and pain that she knew. And so Hagar does one more thing. God having called her by name, God having named her future in her son, she turns around and she names God. I bet before this she'd had lots of names for God. Probably a lot of names that came out of how she felt about herself. The names that would come from being a person who was unwanted and unlovable and broken, a person who maybe you've got some of these names for yourself as well, too far gone, hopeless, never going to change, stuck, all of these things that we call ourselves. And out of those names for herself, how she saw herself, she saw God, and she would probably have names for God up to this point like angry, or God the disappointed, or God the distant, or God the silent, God the fickle. Who knows exactly what she thought? But after this encounter with Him, after actually being seen by Him and seeing Him, This is what she says. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That's why the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. The name that she gives to God has everything to do with being seen and seeing clearly. This is the God who sees me. Her real identity wasn't the maidservant, it wasn't the slave girl, it was the one who is seen by God. And God saw her because he loved her. I mean, that's how it works. Like, our identity comes when we are seen truly by God, and then when we see God back because of that. And what we see is the God who sees us not because he's trying to smite us, he sees us because he loves us. He knows exactly where you are. He knows exactly what you're going through. He knows exactly what you need. He is exactly who you need. And he is intent on finding you because he loves you. If you ever wondered what the core of who you are is, you are loved. That's it. The God of the universe, the Almighty One, loves you. And that defines your identity more than anything else ever will. And being in the wilderness when you are wandering aimlessly and you can't see the future, you need to learn that again. The wilderness will teach you that again. And as awesome as the promise that God gave her was, as awesome as being pregnant had been to her before, what really got Hagar going, what she reveled in more than anything else, was that she was honored enough. This girl, this nothing, was honored enough to be in the presence of God. Wandering in the wilderness because we can't see past our pain, because we don't know what's coming next, and we don't see a future. It is often there that God comes to find us the most. He is intentionally looking to see if he can come and meet with us there. Unplugged from so much of the stuff that clouds our vision and scratches our eyes, he wants to come and heal our vision and clear this stuff away so that we can see again not only where we've come from and where we're going, but who we are and who he is. He wants us to see him clearly, and he wants us to see ourselves as he sees us. When we do that, then we can have hope. Not just to live in now, but to walk towards in the future. That we can get through whatever it is we've got to get through, knowing that he will be with us for what's next. It comes because I know I'm loved by the Almighty God who sees me and longs to give me a hope and a future. And ultimately, that hope and future is found in the name that he gave his son Jesus. God saves. That he would be willing to give of himself everything that he might come to give us everything. Freedom, life, forgiveness, a place to belong, a hope and a future. And he would come to offer it to us right in the middle of the worst moments we find ourselves in. He isn't waiting for us to get it figured out and then show up with that. He will find us when we are nameless and broken and lost. And he will give us himself. He will make sure that we are seen and valued and that we can see him back. And there's no better day than today to experience that. And if you are seeing clearly, I'd say make sure there are no invisible people in your life. That when they have no hope, when they're wandering through the wilderness because of a pain that they can't see past, remind them about who they are. Remind them that they are seen. Remind them that they are loved. Let's pray. Father, too often we go through life and we don't really feel seen. and we don't really see clearly what's in front of us, whether our future or our circumstances or you. And I pray that as we find ourselves in these places again, we would be reminded that it is there in the wilderness when we don't know where to go and all we can see is what's driven us here, that you will intentionally find us. And you will come and meet with us, and you will call us by name, and you will fill us with your love and with your presence in such a way that we will suddenly have a hope and a future again. Lord, if we can find you, everything else will be okay. Not that things won't hurt or be hard, but we will never be abandoned. We will never be unloved. We will never be too far gone for you not to reach us. Lord, thank you for doing everything necessary for us to find you. Thank you for always being the one who comes to us first. Thank you for making sure that when no one else values us, we can be seen and loved by you. Help us to accept that today, to have the courage to go where you would ask us to go because you love us. And if we know what that feels like, Lord, may we be people, when we go through our homes or around the block, when we show up at work or at school, there are no invisible people left. Everyone is seen. Everyone is valued. Everyone discovers who they are in you. We pray these things in your name, Father. Amen.